ಗೋವಿಂದ್ರ ಅವರಿಗೆ ವಂದನೆಗಳು. ಟಿ ಬೈರಣ್ಣವರು ಒಂದೇ ಮಾತ್ರ ಗೀತೆಯನ್ನು
ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ದಯಮಾಡಿ ಮೊಬೈಲ್ ಸ್ವಿಚ್ ಆಫ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ. ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮವನ್ನು 2019 ಏಪ್ರಿಲ್ 18 ಏನು ಮಹಾ ಚುನಾವಣೆ, ಈ ಚುನಾವಣೆ ಹಬ್ಬದ ನಿಮಿತ್ತವಾಗಿ ಎಲ್ಲ ಸಜ್ಜನ ಬಂಧುಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಜಾಗೃತಿಯನ್ನು ಮೂಡಿಸಬೇಕು. ಆ ಮೂಲಕ ದೇಶದ ಹಬ್ಬ ಅದನ್ನು ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಸಹ ತಪ್ಪಿಸ್ಕೊಳ್ದೆ ಏನು ನಡೀತಿರುವಂಥ ವೋಟಿಂಗ್ ಪ್ರಮಾಣ ಇದೆ ಅದು 70 ಇದ್ದಿದ್ದು 90 ಆಗಬೇಕು. ಈ ರೀತಿ ಅದರಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲ ನಾವು ತೊಡಗಿಸ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದ್ರ ಮೂಲಕ ನಮ್ಮ ಸುತ್ತಮುತ್ತಲವರು, ನಮ್ಮ ಸಂಬಂಧಿಕರು, ನಾವು ವಾಸ ಮಾಡುವಂಥ ಬಡಾವಣೆಗಳೇನಿದ್ದೀವಿ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಸಹ ನಮ್ಮ ಮಟ್ಟದಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರಿಗೆ ಫೋನ್ ಮೂಲಕ ಇರಬಹುದು, ವೈಯಕ್ತಿಕವಾಗಿ ಭೇಟಿ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರದ ಹಿತದೃಷ್ಟಿಯಿಂದ ಮತದಾನವನ್ನು ಮಾಡೋಣ ಅಂತ ವಿನಂತಿಯನ್ನು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಬಂದಿರುವಂಥ ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಈ ವೇದಿಕೆಯ ಮೂಲಕ ತಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಕಳಕಳಿಯ ಪ್ರಾರ್ಥನೆಯನ್ನು ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. ನಮಗೆ ಇದುವರೆಗೂ ನಿರ್ವಹಣೆಯನ್ನು ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮದಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾಡಿದಂಥವರು ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಪರಮೇಶ್ ನಮಗೆಲ್ಲ ಪರಿಚಿತರು, ಸುಪ್ರಸಿದ್ಧ ಸಿದ್ಧಗಂಗಾ ಆಸ್ಪತ್ರೆಯ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥಾಪಕ ನಿರ್ದೇಶಕರು ನಮ್ಮ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮವನ್ನು ನಿರ್ವಹಣೆ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಟ್ರು. ಈಗ ಒಂದೇ ಮಾತನ್ನು ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಶಾಂತ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಿಂತು ಗೌರವಿಸೋಣ. ವಂದೇ ಮಾತರಂ ವಂದೇ ಮಾತರಂ ಸುಜಲಾಂ ಸುಫಲಾಂ ಮಲಯಜ ಶೀತಲಾಂ ಸಸ್ಯ ಶ್ಯಾಮಲಾಂ ಮಾತರಂ ವಂದೇ ಮಾತರಂ ಶುಭ್ರಜ್ಯೋತ್ಸ್ನಾ ಪುಲಕಿತಯಾಮಿನಿ ಫುಲ್ಲಕುಸುಮಿತಾ ದ್ರುಮದಲ ಶೋಭಿನಿ ಸುಹಾಸಿನಿ ಸುಮಧುರ ಭಾಷಿಣಿ ಸುಖದಾಂ ವರದಾಂ ಮಾತರಂ ವಂದೇ ಮಾತರಂ ಕೋಟಿ ಕೋಟಿ ಕಂಠ ಕಲ ಕಲ ನಿನಾದ ಕರಾಲೆ ಕೋಟಿ ಕೋಟಿ ಭುಜೈರುತ ಖರ ಕರವಾಲೆ ಅಬಲಾಕಿನೋ ಮಾಯತೋ ಬಲೆ ಬಹುಬಲಧಾರಿಣೀ ನಮಾಮಿ ತಾರಿಣೀ ರಿಪುದಲವಾರಿಣೀ ಮಾತರಂ ವಂದೇ ಮಾತರಂ ತುಮಿ ವಿದ್ಯಾ ತುಮಿ ಧರ್ಮ ತುಮಿ ಹೃದಿ ತುಮಿ ಮರ್ಮ ತ್ವಂ ಹಿ ಪ್ರಾಣ ಶರೀರೇ ಬಾಹುತೆ ತುಮಿ ಮಾ ಶಕ್ತಿ ಹೃದಯೇ ತುಮಿ ಮಾ ಭಕ್ತಿ ತೋಮಾರಯಿ ಪ್ರತಿಮಾ ಗಡಿ ಮಂದಿರೇ ಮಂದಿರೇ ವಂದೇ ಮಾತರಂ ತ್ವಂ ಹಿ ದುರ್ಗಾ ದಶ ಪ್ರಹರಣಧಾರಿಣೀ ಕಮಲಾ ಕಮಲದಲ ವಿಹಾರಿಣೀ ವಾಣೀ ವಿದ್ಯಾದಾಯಿನೀ ನಮಾಮಿ ತ್ವಾಂ ನಮಾಮಿ ಕಮಲಾಂ ಅಮಲಾಂ ಅತುಲಾಂ ಸುಜಲಾಂ ಸುಫಲಾಂ ಮಾತರಂ ವಂದೇ ಮಾತರಂ ಶ್ಯಾಮಲಾಂ ಸರಳಾಂ ಸುಸ್ಮಿತಾಂ ಭೂಷಿತಾಂ ಧರಣೀಂ ಭರಣೀಂ ಮಾತರಂ ವಂದೇ ಮಾತರಂ. ಭಾರತ್ ಮಾತಾ ಕಿ ಜೈ.
ಬೈರಣ್ಣವರಿಗೆ ವಂದನೆಗಳು. ಎಲ್ಲ ದೇಶ ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ವಂದನೆಗಳನ್ನು ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮವನ್ನು ಮುಕ್ತಾಯಗೊಳಿಸ್ತೀನಿ.
Electing a new government. So talking about New India and also talking about defense of India in that context all fall within the framework of an electoral year in which the process has already commenced. The first phase is over. But based on what has happened in the last 5 years, the very terminology New India has come into the public discourse purely because of the way in which the Prime Minister has extended a lot of visionary steps to make India completely new from the point of view of how we govern ourselves. We have to govern ourselves with a lot more sense of pride, ownership, sense of understanding where India should be, because each one of us are contributing our own. But however, the collectiveness of all our contribution doesn't get that kind of attraction which a country of our capability, a country of our size, a country of the skills which our young people have should deserve to get. That is why you see that in the last 5 years, all the effort of our Honorable Prime Minister has been to change the narrative about India, to change the way people looked at India, to change the way people think that nothing can happen in this country, and make them feel, yes, a lot of things can happen in this country which will make you feel proud as Indian citizens. And that is why I think the new India that we are talking about, the initial foundations have been laid in the last 5 years and the results are showing. Otherwise, for a country which for centuries faced a domination and uncalled for violence, a country which even after 1947, much before it could even stabilize, faced the onslaught of a neighbor which kept it as its unfinished agenda to hit at India, to send a ragtag army of non-state actors with the support of the institutions there. Even then in 1947, the first attack on our territory happened through non-state actors who came in such clothes and support of the Pakistani army and occupied some parts, significant parts of Jammu and Kashmir, which even today we call them as Pakistan occupied Kashmir. So the extent of violence and terror and the extent of attack on our borders which this country has put up with in the name of we'll engage, we'll talk, we'll make sure that there is peace obtained with the peaceful ways only. That approach has seen in the last several decades several confrontations with our neighbor, Pakistan. Of course, with China, it's a different story. However, there are quite a few veterans seated here. They can tell you what it takes to keep our borders safe. Constant upgradation of our equipments, constant keeping up the morale of people who go there, keeping their families elsewhere to defend the country. Constant attention to what they need, their families need, and above all, keeping the army better equipped with equipments which are more in tune with the times. So if New India, the India that we deserve, if New India, the India that has to be taken seriously for what it is contributing to the global economy, if New India, actually the Indians diaspora which is everywhere in the world actually making a big difference to those economies, will have to get its due share in the global order. It is important to have a government which stands up and speaks for our strength. And that is why I say in the last 5 years, we've had a government which, even though it came into power during very challenging times, inheriting an economy which was so full of baggages, which had so many challenges, all of which were unattractive work to be done by the successor government. So if you were to turn around the banks, which were waiting for their monies to come back from non-performing assets, if you had banks having no money to lend for deserving borrowers, if the economy was so full of permissions taken, but no activity happening, for example, the various mine certification and licenses which were given during the UPA regime, licenses were obtained, but no iron ore or coal was being extracted from these mines because fly-by-night operators had taken them and wanted to make multiple monies out of it rather by selling the licenses obtained than by extracting the mineral. So, if these sort of things happened in India, and it is that kind of an economy that the new government inherited under Prime Minister Modi, in 5 years, you had to change so many things, some of which were publicly noticed, many of which were unglamorous work to be undertaken in the back room and in the corridors of ministries. These are not probably noticed and they don't really matter because the assumption of the people is you elected to do that, you may as well do that. So end of the day, you had within 5 years a government which showed that it was working with dedication, with no whisper of corruption, but more importantly, India's role, India's image, India's standing abroad was all changed because of the rapid way in which India was changing. And that was achieved by the Prime Minister, as a result of which you have investors coming, you have better picture of India. India is not any longer seen as a red tape country. People understand that investors get their due, and by law, their due, there is no discretion here. All of this is equally important for us to recognize that when it came to defense of India, particularly after the Uri attack in 2016, and now after Pulwama, you found that India's response has been decisive in 2016 with a very clear targeted surgical strike. And now when you took the airstrike to the fountainhead of terror, Jaish-e-Mohammed's own camp, the world understood where India was coming from. The world understood that reforms are being conducted simultaneously with improving the economy. India is the fastest growing economy. We will soon be reaching the third largest on GDP. But for all this, India stood firm on returning the terrorists with really equal firepower. We gave the terrorists what they deserved. We did not give a weak-kneed response to them. And if talking about political will, with which you gave the armed forces the freedom to respond as in the way in which they would find it fit, and so they did make India proud by the air attack in Balakot. We certainly do talk about, both in 2016 and now in 2019, the political will which recognized the armed forces' honor and gave them the freedom to choose as and when and in the way in which they thought it fit to return them. But this kind of an approach was completely absent in 2008. So when we talk about the decision making and talk about the way that India has to be defended in order that new India, in order that stature of India, in order that impression of India is improved, that's not politicizing the armed forces. That's not at all politicizing the armed forces. It is on the contrary, feeling proud about the armed forces and saying if you give them the due honor, and saying that if you give them the due honor, if you give them the due freedom to act as and when as the professional armed forces, they shall make the country proud. That kind of a response is when you believe in your armed forces, when you honor them, when you trust them and give them the freedom. In 2008, that kind of freedom was not given. A weak-kneed response said, no, don't do anything now. Whereas now, the difference between then and now, both in 2016 and 19, it's about the political will, which respects the armed forces. And therefore, when you talk about it, in order that the new India that we are talking about gets its sense of security, that's not politicizing the armed forces. So when Congress party chooses to speak back saying, are you politicizing the armed forces? No, I'm sorry. I also want to sometimes ask questions of those who are concerned in this matter. The zero theory, zero loss theory, you know who propagated it? Zero loss theory during the, the 2G controversy? One of the very famous lawyer ministers of the UPA government propagated the zero loss theory. Very recently he came up with a sting operation in which a very young, recently launched website was quoted. A website which they are indirectly responsible for having launched in the UK. Quoting that website, it was alleged that the Indian Air Force landed with its aircrafts in the Hindon airport, which is close to Delhi, with currencies printed abroad, Indian currency printed abroad. How ridiculous can this allegation be? You are charging and accusing the armed forces, particularly the Air Force, that they transported illegal currency? Are you not dishonoring the armed forces by putting a charge like this at their doorstep? At that time, are you not politicizing the armed forces? Where were these voices which stand up now to say, no, please don't politicize the armed forces? Where were they when this eminent lawyer came up with such a false allegation against the armed forces? Where were these people who are right about being concerned, who are right about standing up for the honor of armed forces? I'm not against that. They're very welcome to write to the Supreme Commander. Where were they when one of the eminent leaders called the army chief a Sadaka Gunda? Where were they when one of the eminent leaders, and I'm sorry, I represent Karnataka in the parliament, in Rajya Sabha, a very senior, very respected leader of Congress party, who's superb in literature. He keeps writing in Kannada about many things, our Itihasas and Puranas. He calls the air chief a liar. Where are our people at that time? They didn't think in terms of honoring the armed forces. They didn't have a problem with people calling their own chiefs in such languages. No letter went to the Supreme Commander at that time. So, when you trust and honor your armed forces, when you leave them the independence to go about doing their job in protecting this country, a new India which really starts doing a lot of things, gets the support of the entire world. And that is why post-Balakot, not one country criticized India. This is the result of a Prime Minister without giving himself a break, went around different countries, engaged with them, spoke to them to isolate Pakistan, which is responsible for the 2008, which is responsible for Uri, which is responsible for Pulwama. Whether they directly do it or they train the suicide bomber and send them in the name of non-state actors. Pakistan is responsible for all this. And that is why when Prime Minister goes over to different countries and shows them the evidence and makes sure that they do the needful to isolate Pakistan, not give funds to them. In the FATF, which is the Financial Action Against Terror Funding, we were successful in isolating Pakistan, putting them in the grey list. Putting them in the grey list so that they don't get monies which can be diverted to supporting terror. And Pakistan, for all you know, constantly says we are also a victim of terror. If they are a victim of terror, what we did in Balakot should have been done by them to go hit at the Balakot terror camp and finish them. No. It is only for building a narrative and creating sympathy globally. They want to say they are also a victim of terror. They are the fountainhead of all terrorist groups because they thrive in Pakistan. They move around freely in Pakistan. And we hit at only them and not any military installations or madrasas. We didn't hit at madrasas, we didn't hit at military installations, but we hit at very clearly the terror fountainheads. So that's how I think that national security related issues directly have a bearing in creating a new India which will give the stature, which will give the status, which will give the recognition which all of us Indians so deserve and which we don't need to have, such as corruption, such as making India appear as though this is a country full of cronyism and red tape. Here, discretion works. Give kickbacks, you can get orders. That's not the India we want. And Modi is ensuring that. And therefore, we need to bring him back. I appeal to all of you that on the day when you have to go and vote, please keep in mind that we as Indians deserve good government because all of us do our maximum best towards keeping this country together, towards keeping our families safe, towards making sure we legitimately earn and keep our families educated, healthy, and protect our senior citizens. So for that India, we deserve a government which will be clean, which will be transparent, which will be decisive, and which make us all proud. Jai Hind.
Thank you, madam. Now we will move on to interaction session. Now I will request Pradeep to start the questionnaire.
ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. ಆನ್ಲೈನ್ ರಿಜಿಸ್ಟ್ರೇಷನ್ ಮೂಲಕ ಸುಮಾರು 1,000 ಜನ ರಿಜಿಸ್ಟರ್ ಆಗಿದ್ರು. ಒಳಗೆ 600ಕ್ಕೂ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳನ್ನು ಆನ್ಲೈನ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಕೇಳಿದ್ರು. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ 600 ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳನ್ನು ಮಾನ್ಯ ಮಂತ್ರಿಗಳ ಮುಂದೆ ಹೇಳೋದು ತುಂಬ ಕಷ್ಟ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಸುಮಾರು 5-6 ಜನ ಸ್ಕ್ರೀನಿಂಗ್ ಕಮಿಟಿ ಮಾಡಿ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳನ್ನು ಸ್ಕ್ರೀನ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. The questions were screened. Actually, there were nearly 600 questions that we got. ಸಾಮಾನ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಕೆಲವು ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳಿಗೆ ಈಗಾಗಲೇ ಉತ್ತರ ಕೊಟ್ಟುಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಥವಾ ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಪ್ಲಾಟ್ಫಾರ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾನ್ಯ ಮಂತ್ರಿಗಳು ಉತ್ತರ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಅಂಥದ್ದನ್ನು ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೇವೆ. ಎಷ್ಟೋ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳು ಸಿಮಿಲರ್ ಆಗಿತ್ತು, ಅದನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ಬಂಡಲ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಯನ್ನಾಗಿ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಕೇಳಿದಾಗ ನೀವು ಕೇಳಿದ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಬಂತು ಅಂತ ನೀವು ಅಂದ್ಕೊಳ್ಬೇಕು. ಭಾವಾರ್ಥ ಅದೇ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ನೀವು ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಬೇರೆ ಇರಬಹುದು, ದಯವಿಟ್ಟು ನೀವು ಅದನ್ನು ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಬೇಕು. The first question. There were questions about demonetization, there was questions about GST, there were questions about internal security and all those things. The first question is, could you like to come here? The first question is, being former Commerce Minister, how would you rate demonetization on a 10-point scale? And you please explain your rating.
I don't think I want to even go on a 10-point scale, but I will definitely say one or two things about it. It had both short-term and long-term impact on our economy. Short-term impact and long-term impact have definitely, and you would agree, have definitely changed the way in which we look at our economy. We look at how we handle ourselves in the economy, whether as private individuals or as individuals who are doing businesses, and in the way in which we handle our finances. It is necessary that every economic activity, what is an economic activity? Buying and selling, producing, trading, all are economic activities. Every economic activity should have some record somewhere. Money transacted generates value. Money transacted also produces many other ripple effects in the economy. If 80% of all transactions that we were doing before demonetization was only in cash and with no records of transaction at all, can you please recognize the fact that the economy cannot calculate those transactions, cannot take into account those transactions when you're actually evaluating the size and the value of your economy. So once you enter a transaction, either through a bank movement of your money, you put somebody in their account the money that you have to pay them, or you receive money through banks, there is some kind of an accounting of that movement. But when you don't do that, and all of us for small purchases and all of us for big purchases, just keep moving around in cash, it never comes under the radar. So are we strengthening our economy or are we undermining our economy? And therefore demonetization served the large purpose of every one of our monies going into the bank, and if you claim that it was legitimately your money, it was not treated as a black money. If you just put the money all right into your bank, but you still didn't have an answer, obviously you have to say where you got that money from. If your explanations added up, fine. If it didn't add up, to that extent you had to pay a penalty and say, now legitimize this money. Today, as a result, and post that, when GST also has come into the works, every one of us benefit from, if we are a producer, the input costs now being able to legitimately get passed on. And you get the input credits for it. And those buyers don't pay twice the tax. One to the fellow who's giving the input and one to the fellow who's giving you the value-added final manufactured commodity. So it saves you additional tax, it saves you from duplication of tax, it also makes sure that producers don't artificially need to jack up their price because the inputs are all costed tax paid. If that tax is removed from their expenses and they're given credit for it so that they can move it to somebody else, it helps even in effectively costing each one of the small product to big product. So demonetization made the beginning for it, and as a result, today the economy is a lot more accounted for, and we don't keep monies under the bed, under our sofas, and think we are rich. We have made the country poor by doing that. You can be rich and also make the country richer by accounting for it. That's all the demonetization.
The other question is like this. The opposition attacks the government on the job crisis issue. However, they are mum because they know that the growth rate is high, the inflation is low, the economic condition of the present India is also good. Then how do you respond to the job crisis that the opposition is saying?
See, at any point in time, allegations with data, we can respond to with data and meaningful logic. Data about jobs in this country, not after Modi's government, but even before, collected by institutions always confine themselves to collecting data on jobs only in the formal sector. Formal sector is those who are working in government, those who are working in banks, those who are working in companies which have registered trade unions and so on. But I'm sure, even if you walked around TUMKUR, you'll know how many such companies or such institutions are existing only in TUMKUR. Very few. But does that mean that in TUMKUR no other activity happens? Each one of us are engaged somewhere. Smaller jobs are being conducted by many people. There are small enterprises where 3 or 4 people work. These are unorganized sector. There is no way in which any government institutions collect data on them. So as it is, in this country, there has been only institutionalized data collection on jobs through organized sector working, formal sector. What happens to the rest of them? I don't know why enough time and attention was not given, but we don't collect data on them. Now, of course, there's a way in which government is trying to sort that mess out. So what has happened is, when you look at jobs only as 9 to 5, and with employment being not just there, with many employment existing outside, and this is not today's case, India has always been like that. We don't have proper data to prove this way or that way. However, I will say from the government, if loans are being given to unorganized sector people through mudra of all sizes, and people have taken loans, does it mean that they are not working, or does it mean that they are working and maybe for expansion of business, maybe bring in a few more additional workers? The EPFO, Employees Provident Fund Organization, records people who come and contribute for the pension. Their numbers are going up. Who are these people? Old ones have their pension. The new ones also have to come on board. They are coming on board and pay. These are indicators to say that there are, other than formal sectors, jobs being created, jobs being assisted, jobs being facilitated. So a meaningful debate on jobs will have to include all this and not just the confines of the formal sector. In this government, we have given entrepreneurs and enterprises more loans than ever before. So we would appeal to everybody who wants to talk on jobs to talk about that as much as talking about mudra, as much as talking about banks which are giving for small and medium industries. Take all of them on board.
Thank you, ma'am. Honorable Minister, the third question is like this. In 2014, when the NDA was elected to the power, we were all happy that the scamsters during 10 years of EPA rule could be behind bars. However, after 5 years, none of them were convicted and some of them were even acquitted of charges. How do you look at it?
Well, I don't think the stages of seeking justice are layered and it takes its own time. It is only because we are really allowing the law to take its course and not interrupting in them or disrupting them, doing favors to those who have violated the Indian law, that they are moving fast. And because they are moving fast, a lot of defaulters are finding their feet on them and therefore they are leaving the country and running away. We are making sure that they are brought back and in the meanwhile their assets are confiscated. That is why when you hear Prime Minister who says, look, in the 5 years, I have made sure that many of these offenders are on the verge of going into the jail. I need more time to send them into it. So within 5 years you have not done this, you have not arrested them, even when you are not interfering in the process of investigation, but making sure that every black money related, every offender related cases don't suffer from prejudice and that they should go on. We are accused of vendetta. You are accused of doing it for political purposes. If there is pakka information on some black money being hidden somewhere, or some illegal money being kept, or some money being used for some wrong purposes is kept, and if ED or income tax department go there, they are all processes which are happening. And therefore, as Prime Minister rightly said, it is getting closer. They will be in the jail soon.
Honorable Minister, your take on the Nyaya scheme announced by the Congress in its manifesto as an economist. Is it economically feasible for a country like India?
I first of all want to draw your attention that what is Nyaya? It's a scheme for eradicating poverty, right? It's a scheme for eradicating poverty. Do we understand it like that? No? Is there a different understanding? What is it? Huh? No. Is Nyaya for removal of poverty, or is it for something else? For removal of poverty? No, I just want a in-the-face answer. What does Nyaya, why was there need for Nyaya, or what are they saying that they're going to do with Nyaya? To remove poverty or to help the poor.
Not to remove poverty, madam, just to feed the poor people.
No, you may give your own interpretation, but what the Congress is claiming is that this Nyaya is for people who are poor. We have to give Nyaya to them, and therefore I'm bringing it, right? I'm asking, isn't that what Mrs. Indira Gandhi said when she said Garibi Hatao? Isn't that what, after that also Rajiv Gandhi, Narasimha Rao time, all Congress's ruling aimed at removal of poverty? You've heard of 20-point program during Mrs. Indira Gandhi's time. First of all, even before they bring the Nyaya out, they should say we have to bring the Nyaya because from Indira Gandhi's time we tried, but we failed in removing poverty. Let us look at it. And now that they say, yes, we failed in removing poverty and bringing Nyaya because now we want to execute it better, then the debate starts whether it can be done. I want to contrast it with many of the schemes that we've done without making a big noise about it. How genuine poor get free gas connection, and how genuine poor get electricity, how genuine poor also has Jan Dhan given to them, all that Mudra loan given to them, all that without raising the taxes at all. In the last 5 years, if anything, taxes have come down, they have not gone up for any section. Whereas, even as they talk about Nyaya, the guru of the Congress Party's president, Sam Pitroda ji, has already said Nyaya can be implemented, but the tax will have to be increased. And the middle class will have to be right and fair to the society, so they'll have to bear the brunt. My question is, how come they seem to take the middle class for granted, that for their decades of failure to remove poverty, it will be the middle class and not the first family of the country to pay the money? You disrupt the country, you pay.
Honorable Minister, the Chief Minister of Karnataka, Shri H.D. Kumaraswamy, 7th April 2019, made a statement to the media that an ex-army officer, in conversation with him, told him that Pulwama will be orchestrated 2 years later, just before the elections, to win the elections. Does these charges need serious investigation, or is it just an election gimmick? Being a Chief Minister, is it necessary that he should hold his breath before speaking anything.
The Chief Minister said it. The Chief Minister has said it. I would want to take it very seriously.
The Chief Minister has also told that those who do not have to look for suicide will join the Indian Armed Forces.
I'd like to take it very seriously. And if 2 years ago itself, this unnamed army or Air Force, armed forces personnel has warned them that before the election such a thing would happen, I wish he warned us. Because the lives of the 40 Pulwama martyrs could have been saved. I wish he had warned us. Now, would it be that he's equally responsible as much as the suicide bomber? Yes. I'm asking a question. A chief minister got to know that 2 years ago some unnamed armed forces personnel has told him this. I wish in the interest of India and I wish in the interest of the CRPF who sacrificed 40 of their men, our brethren, he had alerted us. I wonder why he didn't.
With same bureaucracy and with same machinery, how is it that the UPA was not able to achieve that the NDA was able to achieve in these 5 years?
Because I think you should be committed and dedicated towards putting the nation first and making the country work. You cannot blame the bureaucracy or you cannot blame any one section without trying to work with them honestly. There may be 1 or 2 exceptions in every field, but I like to say that once you show that you're working honestly, most of the bureaucrats work together with you. They get scared of people who have other agendas. So they may not work, or they may distance themselves, or they may say, no, we don't know what is in this. But with this government, with Modi ji's leadership, policy drives, policy works. It is policy which decides, but we don't interfere in it. That is why officials know that if they are working together, all of us are equally committed to doing a transparent job. Nobody is fixing the other person and making others a scapegoat. And therefore, bureaucracy works.
Any defense procurement takes a very long time. Will it continue to take long time even in future, or will it take very short time to procure any defense?
No, as it is, I think a lot of procurement based on the exigencies, the powers have been delegated to the vice chiefs of the 3 forces. So if they think they are running short of ammunition, if they are thinking that they are running short of some critical equipments, the powers are well within the vice chiefs, armed forces headquarters to take a call. So they can go about buying it, nothing delays them, nothing stops them. 1. Second, as regards capital procurement, which normally takes a lot of time, we have made the procedures simplified without sacrificing transparency. So when Defense Acquisition Council meetings for capital purchases used to happen once in 6 months, now they're happening once every fortnight.
The communists have been routed from Bengal and recently from Tripura. They have only some small pockets left now. Is there any chance of their revival at all?
Not if you fellows choose or all of us choose not to vote to them. If all of us choose not to vote communists, there will never be a revival. It's us who are giving legitimacy to outdated ideologies, to violent ideologies, to ideologies which doesn't suit the tone, tenor, DNA, culture, ethos of this country. Ideologies which are alien to our culture. We don't need to give them any kind of support. So if you don't give support, there is no chance of them reviving.
Even though there are hundreds of reasons to state why NDA may be elected back to power, what according to you are the 5 big reasons so that the NDA will be voted back to power?
Hundreds is what I still feel. How can I reduce to 5? How can I reduce to 5? First, the government is led by a decisive, clean leader. Very unlike prime ministers who have been remotely controlled. Here's a prime minister who sits together with his council of ministers and takes a call for what should be done and what should not be. So he is hands-on and directly engages in governing this country. So that I would say is the second. Third, tirelessly works for this country, doesn't take picnics or outings or breaks. You may say that's his style, I don't need to govern the country like this, I still take breaks, but govern. But govern! You don't disappear even during critical times and come back and tear pieces of legislation which your own government has done. You go on a picnic or come back, and after you come back, even when the Prime Minister is not around, I tear legislations because I got to know about it now, so I have to tear it off. This type of part-time running of this country cannot be accepted. Full-time engagement. Full-time engagement is what this country of this size, of this population, of the kind of aspirations that we have, we need full-time attention. So, even if you legitimately claim your personal time, when you attend to the country, you give it full time and you don't act whimsically, mercurially, shout out and tear out and call people names. We want somebody who is going to be mature and responsible. And therefore, the Prime Minister. Fourth, doesn't ever forget his humble origins. Even reaching the level of Prime Minister and having been a long time undefeated Chief Minister of Gujarat, his feet are firmly on the ground. He doesn't get carried away. I am the Prime Minister. No. His feet are firmly in the ground. He runs a responsive and government which is sensitive to the needs of the people. If you think that something is not happening, he responds to it. He engages with people directly. He doesn't depend on a few, interlocutors in the media or somewhere who will build him up. No, he talks to you directly. So that's the fourth reason. And the fifth, he's got a vision for India. In 2014, he spoke about 150th anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, which is in 2018-19, and said we need to give Mahatma Gandhi a reward, paying back to him for all that he's done. So let's do something on Swachh Bharat. That was dedicated even in 2014 for 18-19 when it is 50th year of Mahatma. Then he spoke about 2022. By which time India will be 75 years as free India. He said, let's think about it. What kind of a service can we do to this country when it is 75 years? Will at least every Indian citizen have a roof over his head? Housing for all came out of that. Will every farmer who is the annadata of this country have his income doubled? That was a vision which came out of it. By 2022, farmers to have twice their income of what they have. He has a vision for the country. And similarly, by 2047, he has a vision when India would be 100 years as free India, independent India. He wants India to get out of this bracket of developing country to become a developed country. And that is why the fifth, but the most important is, you need a visionary leader who periodically sets goals for himself and delivers. He didn't say it and left it like that. He made sure most of India by now has declared itself as open defecation free. Toilets were built. Schools were given toilets so that girl children don't drop off. Housing for all has already gained momentum. Farmers, lots more have to be done, but at least we've shown clear signs. In fact, I was telling the other day, when I came here to launch that program which Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman, there are so many farmers in Karnataka who should benefit from that scheme. We don't even have a speedy information base of all those farmers, particularly those in North Karnataka, which depends on rain, and rain only irrigation is not adequate. For them to give the 6,000 rupees per year? What stops the state government from quickly giving us the list? All of them will benefit. No, I hope somebody goes and tells the Chief Minister. At least 2 years from now, every farmer would have got, but Karnataka farmer wouldn't have got it. Just as they warned them about Pulwama, I wish somebody goes and warns. 2 years from now, everybody would have got, the 6,000 and also doubling of income, but Karnataka farmers will be waiting because nobody would have told them that this is happening. So like that, looking at vision for India, that's important for a leader. Not just mercurially commenting and calling everybody names.
The minister's time permits us to ask her 2 more questions. The next question is that we appreciate the stand taken by the Government of India post-Pulwama, and we hail the Army and the government for the success of the same. However, do you agree that the Pulwama was a serious intelligence failure as the opposition alleges?
I don't think, because there are times when you get actionable intelligence. Intel reports keep coming almost every day. There are actionable ones on which we take immediate, concrete steps. There are times when actionable intelligence doesn't come, and therefore you're doing here, you're doing there, you're doing elsewhere. It can always be a breach. So I don't, for one, being very firm on that, I don't think it was an intelligence failure. There are so many factors which make up for what actionable intelligence.
This would be the last question. Does the Rafale show really dent the prospects of NDA in 2019?
Say that again.
The shore of Rafale, will it really dent
Shore
the
as in Hindi shore.
shore?
So the shore of Rafale?
Will it dent the prospects of NDA in 2019?
Not at all. I said in Parliament, Bofors was a scandal, it brought the Congress down. Rafale is not a scandal, and the decision made on Rafale. And the decision made on Rafale is made in national interest. And therefore, Rafale will bring back Modi with even more majority.
Thank you, Minister. We would have asked you 100 more questions and got very valuable answers, but the Minister saying permits only this much. Thank you, Minister, for giving us all the answers.
ಪ್ರಶ್ನೋತ್ತರ ಅವಧಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಮುಗಿಸಿಕೊಟ್ಟಂತಹ ಪ್ರದೀಪ್ ಅವರಿಗೆ ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳು. Now I will request our Honorable Defence Minister to present conclusive remarks, if it is permitted.
I think I've said all that I need to say. It's time for you all to think and make a decision which is going to benefit the country, strengthen the country, and make the country even more energetic and successful. So I would appeal to all of you all to please bring back Prime Minister Modi for the next time.
Thank you. ಗೋವಿಂದರಾವ್ ಅವರಿಂದ ವಂದನಾರ್ಪಣೆಗಳು.
ಹರಿ ಓಂ. ವಂದನಾರ್ಪಣೆ ಆದ ನಂತರ ಒಂದೇ ಮಾತರಂ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಒಂದೇ ಮಾತರಂ ಆದ ನಂತರ ಮಾನ್ಯ ಅತಿಥಿಗಳು ಸಭಾಂಗಣವನ್ನು ವಿರಮಿಸ್ತಾರೆ. ಅಲ್ಲಿ ತನಕ ನಾವು ಯಾರೂ ಸಹ ನಮ್ಮ ಸೀಟುಗಳಿಂದ ಏಳಬಾರದು. ಇದು ನಾನು ತಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ರಿಕ್ವೆಸ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದೀನಿ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಈ ದಿನ ನಮ್ಮ ನಡಬೇಕು ಈ ಒಂದು ಸಂವಾದದ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮವನ್ನು ನಡೆಸಿಕೊಡ್ತಿರುವಂತಹ ಮಾನ್ಯ ನಿರ್ಮಲಾ ಸೀತಾರಾಮನ್ ಅವರಿಗೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಥಿಂಕರ್ ಫಾರ್ಮ್ ಮತ್ತು ಚಿಂತಕರ ಚಾವಡಿಯ ಪರವಾಗಿ ಕೃತಜ್ಞತೆಯನ್ನು ಅರ್ಪಿಸ್ತೇನೆ. ಅದೇ ರೀತಿ ನಮಗೆ ಈ ಸಂವಾದದ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮವನ್ನು ನಡೆಸಿಕೊಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ 15 ದಿನದಿಂದ ನಾವು ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಪ್ರಿಪರೇಷನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ವಿ. ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಅಗತ್ಯವಾದ ಆಡಳಿತಾತ್ಮಕ ಒಪ್ಪಿಗೆಯನ್ನು ಪಡಿಬೇಕಾಯಿತು. ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಸಹಕರಿಸಿದಂತಹ ಸಿದ್ಧಗಂಗಾ ತಾಂತ್ರಿಕ ಶಿಕ್ಷಣ ಮಹಾವಿದ್ಯಾಲಯದವರಿಗೆ, ಅದೇ ರೀತಿ ಈ ಒಂದು ಆವರಣದಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲರ ಚೇತನವಾಗಿ ಆಧ್ಯಾತ್ಮಿಕ ಶಕ್ತಿಯನ್ನು ತುಂಬಿರುವಂತಹ ಸಿದ್ಧಲಿಂಗ ಮಹಾಸ್ವಾಮಿಗಳವರಿಗೂ ಸಹ ನಾವು ಈ ಸಮಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಕೃತಜ್ಞತೆಯನ್ನು. ಅದೇ ರೀತಿ ಈ ಆಡಳಿತ ಮಂಡಳಿಯ ಡೈರೆಕ್ಟರ್, CEO ಮತ್ತು ಪ್ರಿನ್ಸಿಪಾಲ್ ನಮಗೆ ಪೂರ್ಣ ರೀತಿಯಾದಂತಹ ಸಹಕಾರವನ್ನು ನೀಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅವರ ಸೇವೆಯನ್ನು ಸಹ ನಾವು ಕೃತಜ್ಞತೆಯಿಂದ ಸ್ಮರಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ. ನಾವು ಈ ಒಂದು ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮವನ್ನು ಯಶಸ್ವಿಗೊಳಿಸಲಿಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರ ಮಾಧ್ಯಮವನ್ನು ಮತ್ತು ಮೀಡಿಯಾವನ್ನು ಬೆಳೆಸಿದ್ವಿ. ತಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲರ ಒಂದು ರೆಸ್ಪಾನ್ಸ್ ಏನಿದೆ ಅದು ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮವನ್ನು ಸಕ್ಸಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದೆ. ಮುಂದೆನೂ ಸಹ ಚಿಂತಕರ ಚಾವಡಿ ಈ ರೀತಿಯ ಅನೇಕ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಗಳ ಹಿಂದೆನೂ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದು, ಮುಂದೆನೂ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ತಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲರ ಆಗಮನದಿಂದ ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ ತುಂಬ ಯಶಸ್ವಿಯಾಗಿದೆ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸಿದಂತಹ ಎಲ್ಲ ದೇಶಭಕ್ತ ಜನರಿಗೆ ಮತ್ತು ನಮ್ಮೊಡನೆ ಸಹಕರಿಸಿದ ಎಲ್ಲ ಸಾರ್ವಜನಿಕರಿಗೆ ಕೃತಜ್ಞತೆಯನ್ನು ಅರ್ಪಿಸ್ತಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾಧ್ಯಮ ಮತ್ತು ಆರಕ್ಷಕ ಇಲಾಖೆ ನಮಗೆ ಬೇಕಾದಂತಹ ಎಲ್ಲ ನೆರವನ್ನು ಒದಗಿಸಿದೆ. ಅವ್ರಿಗೂ ಸಹ ಚಿಂತಕರ ಚಾವಡಿ ಮತ್ತು ನಿಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲರ ಪರವಾಗಿ ಕೃತಜ್ಞತೆಯನ್ನು ಅರ್ಪಿಸ್ತಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಈಗ ಒಂದೇ ಮಾತನಾಡುತ್ತೆ ಬೈರನ್ನವರು ಇದನ್ನು ನಡೆಸ್ಕೊಳ್ತಾರೆ.
ಗೋವಿಂದರಾವ್ ಅವರಿಗೆ ವಂದನೆಗಳು. ಈ ಬೈರನ್ನವರು ಒಂದೇ ಮಾತು ಗೀತೆಯನ್ನು
ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ದಯಮಾಡಿ ಮೊಬೈಲ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ಆಫ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ. ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮವನ್ನು 2019 ಏಪ್ರಿಲ್ 18 ಏನು ಮಹಾ ಚುನಾವಣೆ, ಈ ಚುನಾವಣೆ ಹಬ್ಬದ ನಿಮಿತ್ತವಾಗಿ ಎಲ್ಲ ಸಜ್ಜನ ಬಂಧುಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಜಾಗೃತಿಯನ್ನು ಮೂಡಿಸಬೇಕು. ಆ ಮೂಲಕ ದೇಶದ ಹಬ್ಬ ಅದನ್ನು ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಸಹ ತಪ್ಪಿಸ್ಕೊಳ್ದೆ ಏನು ನಡೀತಿರುವಂಥ ವೋಟಿಂಗ್ ಪ್ರಮಾಣ ಇದೆ ಅದು 70 ಇದ್ದಿದ್ದು 90 ಆಗಬೇಕು. ಈ ರೀತಿ ಅದರಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲ ನಾವು ತೊಡಗಿಸ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದ್ರ ಮೂಲಕ ನಮ್ಮ ಸುತ್ತಮುತ್ತಲವರು, ನಮ್ಮ ಸಂಬಂಧಿಕರು, ನಾವು ವಾಸ ಮಾಡುವಂಥ ಬಡಾವಣೆಗಳೇನಿದ್ದೀವಿ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಸಹ ನಮ್ಮ ಮಟ್ಟದಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರಿಗೆ ಫೋನ್ ಮೂಲಕ ಇರಬಹುದು, ವೈಯಕ್ತಿಕವಾಗಿ ಭೇಟಿ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರದ ಹಿತದೃಷ್ಟಿಯಿಂದ ಮತದಾನವನ್ನು ಮಾಡೋಣ ಅಂತ ವಿನಂತಿಯನ್ನು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಬಂದಿರುವಂಥ ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಈ ವೇದಿಕೆಯ ಮೂಲಕ ತಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಕಳಕಳಿಯ ಪ್ರಾರ್ಥನೆಯನ್ನು ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. ನಮಗೆ ಇದುವರೆಗೂ ನಿರ್ವಹಣೆಯನ್ನು ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮದಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾಡಿದಂಥವರು ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಪರಮೇಶ್ ನಮಗೆಲ್ಲ ಪರಿಚಿತರು, ಸುಪ್ರಸಿದ್ಧ ಸಿದ್ಧಗಂಗಾ ಆಸ್ಪತ್ರೆಯ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥಾಪಕ ನಿರ್ದೇಶಕರು. ನಮ್ಮ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮವನ್ನು ನಿರ್ವಹಣೆ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಟ್ರು. ಈಗ ಒಂದೇ ಮಾತನ್ನು ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಶಾಂತ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಿಂತು ಗೌರವಿಸೋಣ. ವಂದೇ ಮಾತರಂ, ವಂದೇ ಮಾತರಂ, ಸುಜಲಾಂ ಸುಫಲಾಂ ಮಲಯಜ ಶೀತಲಾಂ ಸಸ್ಯ ಶ್ಯಾಮಲಾಂ ಮಾತರಂ ವಂದೇ ಮಾತರಂ. ಶುಭ್ರಜ್ಯೋತ್ಸ್ನಾ ಪುಲಕಿತಯಾಮಿನೀ ಫುಲ್ಲಕುಸುಮಿತಾ ದ್ರುಮದಲ ಶೋಭಿನೀ ಸುಹಾಸಿನೀ ಸುಮಧುರ ಭಾಷಿಣೀ ಸುಖದಾಂ ವರದಾಂ ಮಾತರಂ ವಂದೇ ಮಾತರಂ. ಕೋಟಿ ಕೋಟಿ ಕಂಠ ಕಲ ಕಲ ನಿನಾದ ಕರಾಲೆ ಕೋಟಿ ಕೋಟಿ ಭುಜೈರುತ ಖರ ಕರವಾಲೆ ಅಬಲಾಕಿನೋ ಮಾಯತೋ ಬಲೆ ಬಹುಬಲಧಾರಿಣೀ ನಮಾಮಿ ತಾರಿಣೀ ರಿಪುದಲವಾರಿಣೀ ಮಾತರಂ ವಂದೇ ಮಾತರಂ. ತುಮಿ ವಿದ್ಯಾ ತುಮಿ ಧರ್ಮ ತುಮಿ ಹೃದಿ ತುಮಿ ಮರ್ಮ ತ್ವಂ ಹಿ ಪ್ರಾಣ ಶರೀರೇ ಬಾಹುತೆ ತುಮಿ ಮಾ ಶಕ್ತಿ ಹೃದಯೇ ತುಮಿ ಮಾ ಭಕ್ತಿ ತೋಮಾರಯಿ ಪ್ರತಿಮಾ ಗಡಿ ಮಂದಿರೇ ಮಂದಿರೇ ವಂದೇ ಮಾತರಂ. ತ್ವಂ ಹಿ ದುರ್ಗಾ ದಶ ಪ್ರಹರಣಧಾರಿಣೀ ಕಮಲಾ ಕಮಲದಲ ವಿಹಾರಿಣೀ ವಾಣೀ ವಿದ್ಯಾದಾಯಿನೀ ನಮಾಮಿ ತ್ವಾಂ ನಮಾಮಿ ಕಮಲಾಂ ಅಮಲಾಂ ಅತುಲಾಂ ಸುಜಲಾಂ ಸುಫಲಾಂ ಮಾತರಂ ವಂದೇ ಮಾತರಂ. ಶ್ಯಾಮಲಾಂ ಸರಳಾಂ ಸುಸ್ಮಿತಾಂ ಭೂಷಿತಾಂ ಹರಣೀಂ ಭರಣೀಂ ಮಾತರಂ ವಂದೇ ಮಾತರಂ. ಭಾರತ್ ಮಾತಾ ಕಿ ಜೈ.